Well, it's been forever and a day since I last made any kind of video, but I'm back and ready to talk about some more Teen Titans. This round we are looking at Geoff Johns' work and talking about how I feel about his comics as they enter the modern age. Let's look at if his Teen Titans can make the grade. Back in the days of grading the Avengers, I expressed a less than favorable opinion concerning Geoff Johns. For one thing, his Avengers books are just not very good and do not hold up very well. It was also at a time when a lot of less than favorable takes on working with Geoff Johns were coming out, and I wasn't feeling particularly generous in my opinion towards the offer because of it. We're going to pull back on some of those criticisms, as while I do maintain my critiques of the man as a worker at DC Comics, it doesn't exactly feel like a coincidence that Ray Fisher, Zack Snyder, and Diane Nelson haven't exactly spoken favorably regarding him. I do like him as a writer overall, at least most of the time. The Avengers book sucked, but his Green Lantern run brought life to a side of DC that was all but dying, and he has written plenty of other comics worth consideration. The Flash, 52, Forever Evil, and Stargirl all come to mind as decent reads. So when it came time to revisit his Teen Titans run, I was pretty excited and optimistic. I remember liking these comics when I stumbled on them here and there back when they were first coming out. I noticed he had a pretty long run on the team too, lasting about 50 issues or so, which to me suggested that he really invested in his time on the Teen Titans, and it must have done at least pretty well commercially. I have to say, on the whole, Geoff Johns' Teen Titans did very little other than consistently and thoroughly impress me from start to finish. This version of the Teen Titans brought with it a huge change to the roster, largely brought about by merging the traditional Teen Titans with some characters and inspiration from the relatively new Young Justice franchise after a crossover event. It goes a really long way to making this era feel like a distinct, unique, and special part of Teen Titans history. We got a really cool and unique roster in the form of Superboy, Wonder Girl, Starfire, Cyborg, and Tim Drake as Robin. Kid Flash was part of the team, but this time the role was filled by Bart Allen, taking on a more serious role from his earlier appearances. Beast Boy also returns to the team, but takes on his more adult name of Changling. There's a lot of Young Justice here, but thanks to consistently featuring the Titans Tower, as well as characters like Changeling, Starfire, and Cyborg, it still very much feels like a series that is part of the Teen Titans. For the record, Young Justice is a distinct and long enough historical franchise that I felt it deserved its own grading series rather than making it a part of this one. But it is worth remarking on how great Young Justice is, as it informs why Geoff Johns' series also kind of rocks. After things kind of got very bland very quickly after Devin Grayson left the previous Titans series, Geoff Johns feels like a breath of fresh air along with all these new characters. With an army of artists for the series like Mike McKone, Tony S. Daniel, and even a couple issues with guest artist Rob Liefeld, these books look pretty great. They really lean into what I like about modern comic book art, especially from the early 2000s. It's so crisp and full of detail, yet still has this distinctly colorful comic book sensibility. A lot of stuff from this era could be desaturated and stuff like that, but every once in a while you come across something that still really pops like this, and it looks so great still to this day. The writing is also really there to back up this cool art. This is Geoff Johns at his finest, right up there with quality and memorability on the level of something like his work in Green Lantern. The biggest moment in his time writing for this series, and it is a massive spoiler, so I'll warn you right now, this series is worth checking out for yourself and not ruining this moment, because Deathstroke shows up early on and is done really well here. He proves remarkably competent against the team by shattering Bart's kneecap during a battle and leaving this character with one of his greatest injuries and challenges in his entire history. But this isn't a one-and-done series with a couple of strong moments like that. It is pretty consistently entertaining for the entire 50 or so issues that Geoff Johns was a main writer for this series. So many characters get cool moments, there's a lot of action that's just excellent and well thought out in a way that you can follow and be entertained by, and lots of big cool set pieces in which our stories take place. Geoff Johns' work here reminds me a lot about what I like about his Green Lantern run. He'll do fan-pleasing stuff like bring back Deathstroke and his kids, but he does it in a new way, with a fresh sense of brutality that really makes it stand out and transitions the team nicely into the modern age. This series even has a tie-in to Identity Crisis, a story I kind of hate, and it's a perfectly entertaining standalone tie-in issue. They're all just kind of passerbys in it. The Teen Titans are young enough they weren't really involved with the conspiracy unraveled by Identity Crisis, so they just kind of get caught up in this crazy, overwhelming attack by Dr. Light that comes out of nowhere to them. It's really well done, and it works perfectly fine even if you know nothing about Identity Crisis as a larger event, which is exactly what a tie-in kind of should be in a series like this, because it doesn't break the flow of the larger Teen Titans series. A key reason as to why that is unlike so many other comic book series where tie-ins feel like this huge interruption has to be the characters. Johns has a really good handle on writing these characters. Teen Titans practically reinvents Superboy in a big way, making major changes to his origin that I think, in the hands of a lesser writer, wouldn't have worked at all. But with Geoff Johns, he just pulls it off effortlessly. It's a really fun direction for the character I think nicely shows off his powers and potential danger. They make him so interesting in these books. He's kind of the standout of the whole team, and definitely what I most took away from this series. Of course, that doesn't mean the rest of the team is left with nothing to do or are just static background characters. The writing does such a good job at turning all these heroes into someone you want to root for. Whether it's Miss Martian or Robin, I want these characters to succeed and find happiness because they look and read like people. It's a fun series of books because issue after issue there's an inherently pleasant feeling to each comic, even when bad stuff is happening, because we get to see a lot of the team living out in the tower, bonding with each other, and protecting the world from these larger-than-life threats. We never get too bogged down in the larger plot lines to not deal with stuff like memorable favorites such as Deathstroke or Trigon attacking, and they're really well done. It feels like the Teen Titans get to be superheroes in this comic, which sometimes gets lost in some of the lesser Teen Titans books, where we fall a victim to focusing a lot on interpersonal drama and grandstanding rather than showing our heroes being superheroes. There's also a focus on villains we haven't really seen before, or at least new twists on them. Lex Luthor in a Teen Titans context is pretty cool, as is this female version of Brainiac. Stuff like that, and heroes from outside the team feeling like a regular presence in this series, like when Superman shows up on occasion, make the world feel like part of a larger world in DC nicely, and I've always found Geoff Johns was pretty good at that sort of thing. He's very good at making this world feel lived in and deeply populated, which makes the world feel grounded even when the events going on in the comics can be very fantastical and sometimes quite weird. So with all this in mind, I don't have a lot of thoughts in terms of what I'd like to have seen different in this series or where things could have improved. It's damn near perfect, but I do have to acknowledge that the Wolfman Perez Titans are just a little more deeper and thoughtful compared to the Geoff Johns comics. Wolfman and Perez regularly deployed politics and confronted real-world issues like racism and drug abuse in the Teen Titans. They had a lot to say, and in turn it is easy to say a lot about their comics because of it. In comparison, Geoff Johns and his artist partners put together a very memorable, polished, and professional series of Teen Titans comic books. But in the world of politics and themes, I have a lot less to say about this series compared to others in the past. Don't get me wrong, all art is political on some level, and the Teen Titans comics by Geoff Johns do have quite a bit to say about the world around them. It's just not quite on the level of Wolfman and Perez, and that's kind of the whole point of this series, is comparing the different eras of Teen Titans. So, yeah, these comics are good, great even, but not the best that's ever been. So to be clear, this is one of the all-time greatest of Teen Titans comic books. The stories are fun and invigorating, full of life and whimsy. The characters are nicely written and easy to root for. The villains look cool and feel like they actually have teeth to them. And thanks to that, our characters feel in danger. There's a persistent sense of stakes and risk because these comics have an appropriate level of tension to them. Everything about these books are done right, and I found them thoroughly entertaining. It's an easy recommendation to make and one of the cleaner jumping on points for Teen Titans, even with all the references to past events and returning characters. because it's a damn good run of books, one that I particularly enjoyed when revisiting this franchise. After a while, though, Geoff Johns did go on to leave this series, and I don't think anyone can blame him. 50 or so issues is one hell of a long run for any comic book writer. Yet the series under Johns was so successful that it manages to outlive his time on it, and would run an impressively long additional 50 issues for a volume that ran for over 100 comics total, covering the span of almost an entire decade. Geoff Johns can definitely take a lot of credit for that, but new writers would take the series in a new direction, so we'll be talking more about those comics after Geoff Johns left next time on Grading the Titans.